merely in order to see her ragdoll because of the frustrations that she sometimes... She can be very frustrating, especially in this game where the animation glitches and some of the sogginess of the controls really can be very frustrating. The nice thing is there's actually very little precision required in controlling in this game. There are very few puzzles that require any precision that I know of, apart from one treasure that I can think of in one of the areas that requires you to sprint in order to get to it. And by sprint I mean sprint and then jump, because you go slightly further if you're sprinting. However, as far as I know, it's the only jump you need to be sprinting to do. So it's a bit of an odd one. I think the thing about complexity is this. Unnecessary complexity is obviously unnecessary and by definition not what you want. But any game that gives you the opportunity for depth, even if you don't have to take it, and then rewards you for using the game in a deep way, such as, for example, Devil May Cry 4's ability to weapon switch. If you chose to, you can do some really quite amazing combos using Dante and its various different weapons. Let's headshot you. Headshot for you. And that uses up all our thing, and then we'll jump onto this one. What the hell? Jump onto it. Silly Laura. There we are, that's better. Okay, that's not quite so as planned. Actually, probably glitched in that. You can't actually evade these guys by jumping, you have to roll like this. Actually, let's use this wall. There we go, little hop. And they're down. The tigers are actually, they can be quite deadly in this, but you see me run around a little bit and don't get too hard. I mean, you can do them in a much cleaner sense. They're harder, in fact, than the enemies that make up most of the rest of the game, as you shall find out, because they actually jump on you. The Nagas are, well, I won't talk about them yet. Here we go. And here's where we can make use of those little climbing poles we spotted earlier. Interestingly enough, I mean, this is to be a Hindu structure. Hindu is a very old religion. But the place where we are, Thailand, is a majority Buddhist country, really. But the legend that they invoke in this particular area for the bad guys, in fact, I'll talk about Nagas. They call them Naga. It's in fact a feature of both Hindu and Buddhist belief. Well, Buddhist, I suppose, not many people believe in Naga, but they're part of the scripture. The Naga were traditionally meant to be, well, the problem is the word Naga means serpent, and in many cases it can refer to a whole bunch of different things, including actual snakes, the king of snakes, or people who have snake heads, or snake-bodied people who have human heads, and so forth. And it's often unclear what people are referring to. For example, there's a story in Buddhist tradition where the Buddha, having meditated under the tree of Bodhi, I think Bodhi means enlightenment, is sheltered from the rain by the king of serpents, Mukalina, I think his name is, and he is referred to as a Naga, despite not being what might be recognised necessarily as a Naga in Hindu mythological tradition, I suppose. Maybe he would be, I'm not really sure, because the whole thing is very uncertain. I had a quick scoot through various different sources I could find, including the Dictionary of Mythology that for some reason lurking around my room, and I couldn't really get much in the way of coherent agreement on the topic. Anyway, down we go. Anyway, so Nagas are basically meant to be kind of people, in general, snake-like people. In some cases, snakes, some people like snakes. So what they've chosen to do here is they've represented the Naga as basically large monitor lizards, which I think is a little bit silly. I mean, not silly in the sense that they're saying that the myth comes from these things, which is often a lot of the point in this, is they're saying, or at least that was sort of meant to be a lot of the point of it, which is, here is the original source for a lot of these myths that we see, and they're all part of this original proto-myth. Cool. So they have the Naga being called. But except the problem is that these are lizards. You wouldn't necessarily say, you wouldn't turn lizards into snakes, because it's fairly obvious the difference. One has legs, the other doesn't. Anyway, there we go. I'm also, I mean, this is in general ties into I think they're slightly, I don't know, I don't like what they did with the proto-myth concept, because let's summarize. The proto-myth concept in its original inception was quite interesting. In Legend, the idea was basically that there were a whole bunch of these common events that happened in old civilizations that were to do with them encountering the relics of this very advanced but very ancient Atlantean civilization. So, for example, in this one we have these. Oh, see, she stumbled. Cool. Oops, don't jump. We have the what comes up later in this level. The sword. Be quiet for this.
The characters are Vedic Sanskrit. They're severely weathered. Bhagavati of the seventh. It must be referring to the capital of Patala, the lowest infernal world in Hindu tradition. It's a netherworld populated by snake people, although the enlightened one, Narada, spoke rather fondly of it. That's Shiva on top, and his mistress Kali is down below.
So anyway, as I was saying, these various different myths were all variations on these common events. So for example, we have in the past, that's a Naga going right up that wall. It's just there to scare you, to show you what's going on in this area. Anyway, so before I quickly carry on my rambling discussion of this, I shall quickly show you what we were meant to have noticed the moment we walked in here, which is this lever over here. So let's give this lever a nice little tug, just to see what it does. Give it a tug. We see this is trying to move, but these massive ropes link it to these two turntables. So we can see that something must be blocking this from turning. So let's go and find out what it is. Anyway, as I was saying, so all these various different myths are spin-offs from events that have occurred as a consequence of the Atlantean relics. So we have the sword and stone myth turning up over and over again. Now, that's quite a cool idea, and if you can link together the myths, it's good and it works well. The only problem is that in this particular version they simply say that one set of myths, quite recent myths relatively, the Norse myths, are based on more truth than the others. So for example, there is an actual Niflheim, there is an actual Helheim, maybe not places for the dead, but these places exist. And, moreover, that the Vikings knew of them and had inscribed them. Notice that when she goes in there, she says Proto-Norse runes. So, they'd clearly been there and noticed. Oh, by the way, you can shove these things into walls. Sounds quite pleasing. You can also use them to club people with, although I never found a reason to do that. And that, to me, kind of ruins the whole monomyth thing. Oops. The idea of the monomyth is that there's one truth behind them all. But it's not actually any of the individual myths, it's simply this kind of proto-myth. Then that's cool, and it allows you to then say what the proto-myth actually is. Whereas in this, they say, the proto-myth exists, oh, and it's